Hello and welcome to The Appointment. I'm Pranjal Sharma. Joining me today for a conversation is Sanjay Kapoor. He's the MD of Genesis Colors, a leading luxury group in the country. Sanjay, thanks for being with us today. You've been a banker, you were an entrepreneur, and now you're one of the leading faces for luxury sector in India with your own brands and partnerships with global brands. Tell us a little bit about your journey. How did your journey about entering the luxury space, how did that come about?
Well, I think the journey of the luxury space happened a bit by accident, but my journey is I grew up in Singapore, came back, did my 11th and 12th from DPS RK Puram, Sri Ram College, went to the first MBA school in the US that gave me admission without work experience, University of Rochester. Then I worked with Citibank for a short while. I quit. I think I had two phases in business. In the 90s, as a young guy in my 20s, I basically sold ties and scarves all over the world. Great fun, traveled, had a great time, made no business plans. Got more specific down in this business in 2002. I co-founded Genesis Colors along with two partners who have since exited the business. We launched with Satya Paul in 2003. When I said launch, actually the brand has been around since 1985. Satya Paul's son Puneet was one of my co-founders. We relaunched the brand in 2003, did fashion shows, events all over the world, Madame Tussauds, the Cipriani, the works. Took Satya Paul to new heights in 2008, 2009. Tried a hand at other Indian designers, but I think it was too premature. In 2006, 2007, European luxury brands were eyeing India as the next big frontier after China. Correct. There was this huge euphoria. India is 5 years behind China, which of course was proved wrong. That we're more like 15, 20 years behind China. I still remember my first meeting with a brand called Kenzo, right, where I met the guy and he said, you know what, you would be in line, you'd be number 6 or number 7, you don't have the right credentials to run this business. We went ahead and eventually got the brand and then shut it down because it's too premature for India. But I think when we started this business in 2008, as in the global luxury business, I think in the first year, our rent was more than our sales. The Emporio Mall in Delhi and UB City Mall in Bangalore had just opened up. And 2008 is when the global meltdown happened, actually.
That's true.
Right?
That is a terrible time to launch anything.
So it was a disaster, right? You had this swanky mall in the middle of the boondocks, which really wasn't populated enough at that moment. Of course, since then, it's evolved into a beautiful location. But that was tough times. You started a business without really the requisite business plans, but just with.
But that's the risk, and you take the plunge. But now you represent big brands like Canali. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the creation of Satya Paul and how you took an existing brand which was established and gave it a completely new spin. How did that come about? Because it's difficult in India to create a brand for a luxury consumer which is based completely rooted in Indian ethos. So what kind of challenge was that?
I think loads of challenges. The brand was created with a lot of passion. The brand was created with the ethos of color, abstract. In the Iftar, when we relaunched the brand, it was all about saris, evening dresses. We also realized when you're competing against other very well-known designers that exist, not that we didn't have a well-known designer, but we wanted to keep the brand as a face of the company and not as an individual. So Satya Paul reached out to the Indian diaspora in all the rich cities, London, New York, Hong Kong, Singapore. We did fashion shows. We actually, in one form shape, reinvented the sari as almost as a canvas of 6 yards. We did associations with classical music, with famous artists, created a professional design studio around Satya Paul. Today, of course, as the brand is reinventing itself, we've become younger, we have introduced an accessory line, we're doing a lot more ready-to-wear.
I know Satya Paul for ties.
And then, ties. The whole thing was around when we were exporting ties and scarves. Right. We created the most fabulous ties, which we used to sell all over the world, which we decided to sell in India too. Of course, as a Friday dress down culture has evolved more and more. I'm wearing a Satya Paul tie, but ties are less common. You're not wearing a tie right now. But I think, you could spot a Satya Paul. I think that was a great identity on a brand, that you could see the product and say it belonged to a Satya Paul. So creating a brand was interesting, but it had its own challenges. I personally feel that a great brand also lends out to a country. If you look at,
and it should be rooted in the country.
It should be rooted in the country, right?
And do you see Indian consumers reacting positively to it? Because do they say that, okay, Satya Paul is a brand which it resonates with my sense of colors and vibrancy?
Well, yes, but there are challenges. A lot of Indian consumers still have the mindset that they want a foreign brand, a Farang brand, right? Yet there are lots of very proud Indians, and I think they're two extremes. Color resonates very, very well in India, and Satya Paul is all about color and abstracts. So it's a mixed thing. But coming back to the point I mentioned earlier, brands go far deeper than just creating a business. A brand can rub off into a country too. I mean, there's this great Make in India push right now, and I'm happy to discuss what it'll take to create an Indian brand globally.
I'll come to that, but one quick point also about your other brand, Bewitch.
Right.
You created a retail chain out of that.
That's right.
How does that sit in with your existing strategy?
So Bewitch is actually a lingerie brand, an innerwear brand, which was created around the modern Indian women of today. There is no connection with the Satya Paul business. I mean, no connection with the Satya Paul brand. It's housed under the same.
No, it's a separate brand.
It's a separate brand. It's created for the modern young woman of today that wants design. Today, a lot of innerwear brands stand for functionality, but you also want design around it. So we're the edgy part of innerwear for women.
Sanjay, tell us about the partnerships that you've developed to bring global brands in India. It's again been a very interesting journey. The market, as you said earlier, was not ripe, but it's maturing. Give us a sense of the slew of and the suite of brands that you manage in India.
We represent a host of brands in India, either as joint ventures or exclusive distribution arrangements, including brands like Burberry, Armani, Michael Kors, Coach, Canali, Hugo Boss, Jimmy Choo, Bottega Veneta, etc., etc. There's a whole host of them. I think we represent 15 brands right now. It's been an interesting journey for us.
And represent means that you have a distribution and marketing partnership with them.
We are the exclusive India partners for all these brands.
And do you also run retail stores out of them, or it's a different piece?
We do run the retail stores on their behalf, that's correct.
Okay, so how has been your experience in managing these brands? What has been the reception of these brands in India?
Actually, extremely positive, I must say. Indians are very brand aware. They know about models of products, brands, what those brands stand for, really on a real-time basis. Our large challenge in India has actually been growing the width of number of stores we can have for these brands, which is really the infrastructure problem in India.
Is that is access to the market and bringing it to more cities across the country, is that one of the big challenges? You're saying that visibility and knowledge of the brands is there, but taking it to the market is the big challenge.
Absolutely, because there's no infrastructure that exists in India. For example, today our little research shows that for every dollar spent in India, 100 gets spent overseas. We could be off a little bit. I don't have scientific numbers to that. What that clearly shows is the demand. There's a certain segment of people, whether that segment is the top 30 or 50 million Indians, we don't know. There's a demand for these products. People understand them, they know what the brand stands for, and they want to consume those products.
When you say not infrastructure, in the last few years you've seen very well organized retail infrastructure and chains coming up with the hyper malls and the high-end malls across across most of the cities across the country. Why don't you see that as a network for you to showcase your products?
So Pranjal, one of the most important things for luxury brands is the adjacency and the quality of the malls.
Right.
I can count on my finger today, maybe there are 10 or 15 premium malls across India, across multiple cities, right? So our largest distribution for a brand would be, let's say, Burberry with 6 or 7 stores. Mm-hmm. That's not called real distribution. I mean, if you compare with China, where Zegna has 180 stores and Gucci would have 125 stores, I've lost count right now. What is a distribution for a country like India? Where are the malls? There's one Emporio Mall in Delhi, there's a Palladium Mall in Bombay, there's a UB City in Bangalore, and Quest in Calcutta. There's really nothing else beyond this. And is there a pipeline of these malls coming up? Very little. So what are we doing? We're actually saying there is a demand in the market. People are shopping. It's not that we have to go create that demand. The company's been growing, which means both in same-store sales growth and in overall growth, which means everything signifies that there's demand for there. And a lot of the demand is being met by an overseas purchase. I think that's bad for India.
So what is the way out of this?
Multiple things. You know, in many forums, I hear some of the foreigners say, bring down duties, bring down duties. We're not a proponent to bring down duties. I think the government needs to look at luxury and retail in a slightly more proactive way rather than say it's bad to be rich, which is the current government stand. They've imposed a tax on products above 2 lakhs and you know, all sorts of identification. That's just moving the purchases from India to overseas. I think the government needs to realize that a luxury tourist customer also is good for the country. The Indian spending in India rather than overseas is good for the country. I mean, I can give you multiple examples of countries which have developed their luxury retail, or let's say high-end retail, to enhance tourism. Look at Singapore. I don't know what their current tourist intake is, but in India we're at 7 to 8 million of a tourist intake in India. We've got so much going for us. Why would the government not consider improving infrastructure for retail among a host of other things?
But why should this happen at a national level? Why can't it happen at a city level? For instance, why can't one city in India, why can't the business leaders like you in this space partner with one city and say, look, let us position this city as a luxury destination for Indian travelers. If Indian travelers can go to Dubai, they can probably go to that city. You can build a lot of other infrastructure. But the point is that you don't need the government. It can be done with private investment, with a little bit of support from the regional, policy ecosystem.
It could be, but let's say we took Delhi as an example, which is a city with the maximum money, right?
Right.
Delhi's got lots of tourism around it. It's the richest city in some form, shape. Where is the land to create infrastructure? Right? If you go to a private developer, if I was a private developer, I'd rather buy a piece of land and construct residences. It's just so much more lucrative. Whereas the government needs to earmark certain locations like they've done in the past. The current malls that are existing are only because the government has specified that only retail malls can come in there. Not that someone could have bought the patch of land in Vasant Kunj and created residences. They need a lot more than that.
So you see that again, my question is that, when you go to a policymaker, they will say, why should the government support luxury retail space? Shouldn't the market decide this? Why is it not that some of the larger retail partners, shouldn't they look at creating some of this? So I agree to the point that, create exclusive retail spaces and then it will happen. But until that happens, do you see online commerce or single brand retail chains working and helping that cause?
I firmly believe everything that opens up the economy makes us all better, smarter, fitter. So opening up FDI, even though it may go against me, and e-commerce, in my opinion, is good for the economy. It sharpens our skills, improves our efficiencies, improves supply chain. All of that, in my opinion, is good. That's a personal opinion. However, to come back to your point about the infrastructure and whether the private sector can take it up, yes, it should take it up, and it should be a market-led demand. But in a situation to create a balanced city, I think you need the government also to step in. There's huge, vast tracts of land that the government owns. How soon is that going to come out to the market?
Sanjay, the size of luxury market in India is vast and in some ways immeasurable. There are various figures going around. Why is that?
I think just the definition of luxury and what all you put in it varies from survey to survey. I mean, I've heard surveys saying 11,000 crores and I've heard 30,000 crores, right? But the truth is it's growing rapidly. At least in our segment of the business, we've been seeing fairly significant growth in the last several years.
So when you say significant growth, what is your estimate of the size of the market and the growth that you see in the next 5 years?
So the size of the market for, let's say, products and not including services, my best guesstimate would be about 7,000 crores. I think we can see a growth of about 12 to 14% per year for the next 5 years.
And is that also the growth that your company is seeing at Genesis Colours?
Actually, at Genesis, we've had a good run in the last few years. We've been growing at an average CAGR of about 30%, which is a mixture of new stores and same-store sales growth. So that's, the growth is higher than what I'm talking about, the market growth, because we've also been adding new brands and new stores to the fold.
Luxury market, as you mentioned earlier, is not welcomed by the policymakers. What is the argument that can be made to policymakers that they should help this market? How does it help the country? How does it help brand India?
I think twofold. A, if you look at tourism itself, creating a vibrant retail luxury market would help a lot of the high-end tourism to come into India. Today you have about 7 million people coming into India, 14 million going out. A lot of the money that Indians spend overseas will stay in India and encourage a lot of foreign tourists to come into India, which will combine, let's say, a visit to heritage sites and shopping also. That's one. B, I also feel if the government got involved in promoting Indian brands, not specifically just luxury brands, there's going to be a rub-off on brand India. If you look at many European countries, many of them survive on the heritage of their brands. And I think they've done a phenomenal job. Take Italy as an example, right? 25 years ago, Italy was a producer of high-end clothing, furniture, fabrics, food, right? With a lot of the manufacturing moving to China, what Italy did was really up the bar, create brands. Many of what we see as luxury brands today were earlier just high-end quality manufacturers. And if you don't ask it, I know you will, but why would the government get involved in this? If you step back for a second,
right,
creating a brand is a 15, 20, 25-year journey, right? Either a large corporate with a long mindset would do it, right? And many of the large corporates in India have traditionally been in manufacturing and not brand building. I'm not saying all, but many of them. B, if you get private equity, a lot of private equity usually takes a 5, 6, 7-year time horizon, which doesn't work for creating a brand in the long run. So I'm not saying that you need to get aid, but if you go to a small city like Singapore, the government gives subsidized areas, office space, advertisement, promote local brands overseas. I think that'd be useful for the government to get involved in something like that for India, because it kind of backs up with brand India too.
And you think that creating that would show India and reflect on India's image globally as a mature destination for FDI, for tourism, and everything which is related?
Absolutely. I mean, reflecting a strong India would help FDI inflows, other manufacturing tie-ups, India's image in the world. It just improves. I mean, Mr. Modi's done a fantastic job in improving India's image, right? But you need more than just one Mr. Modi out there.
Tell me, I'll have to close the conversation here, Sanjay, but tell us about Genesis Colors now. What's next for you? You have been in the clothing and accessories space for so many years. Are you looking at diversifying into new categories? Are you thinking of launching some of your own domestic brands and businesses? How do you see the group in the next 10 years?
So actually multiple things. We have diversified outside fashion. We've gone into home also with Billroy & Bock. So I think growth for us will come in multiple opportunities. Consistently adding brands which kind of fits well in our portfolio and complements our portfolio well. Adding new categories. We are launching a cosmetic line, an in-house cosmetic line, which I can't talk much about, but that's a completely new category, completely new brand. So I think growth for us is...
That will be your own brand.
That will be our own brand. So growth for us will come from a mixture of in-house brands that we develop in areas that we feel there's potential in growth, and adding new categories, and finally growing the existing brands with more distribution.
Are there any parts of the broad luxury segment and sector which are underserved, where you think that either there is not enough demand, or there is demand but nobody is serving it?
I guess there'll be pockets of that in many cases, right?
Okay.
In many cases, they'll be met by, for example, they'll be met by unorganized players. For example, the jewelry business is a huge market.
Correct.
There's a huge demand, but it's really being serviced by many, many small mom and pop shops, right? How do you organize that?
The global brands really haven't had a big
They
play
haven't had
here.
a chance. Look at the watch business. It's still fragmented. In every city, you have many small watch dealers. So there are lots of opportunities that will come up as the business starts getting scale.
Within that, what is driving growth? What are the sectors you see? What are the categories of products or services you see zooming ahead in this sector for the next few years?
So just because we understand that space very well, I believe fashion will continue to grow very well.
Okay.
And that's also because there's a mindset change. If you step back, when a young girl would take her first job 10 years ago, she'd save 50% of it. Today, she's spending 110% of it, right? So there's a consumption pattern in India today, right? And I don't think that's going to stop. So for us, we're very bullish on fashion and accessories.
Sanjay, thanks very much for joining us, and our best wishes for improved and solid growth.
Thank you, Pranjal.